Dear listeners of the Female Guides Requested podcast, happy Wednesday. This is your host, Ting Ting from Las Vegas. Today, we have two guests, Kristin Arnold and Sheldon Kerr, founders of Moxie Mountain Guides. I was super excited to finally pin them down from their busy schedule to have this conversation. When I edited this episode, I paused multiple times to reflect and ask myself questions. What is a guide? What is a good guide? What are the so-called soft skills and how do they play a role in risk management? I learned so much from them, and I'm so happy that they started Moxie. Both Kristin and Sheldon are AMGA Mountain Guides. AMGA stands for International Federation of Mountain Guides Association, and their certification is the highest credential attainable by a professional mountain guide. As of spring 2024, they are 2 of 17 total women AMGA guides in the U.S. Together, they created Moxie Mountain Guides to align the profession of guiding with their values. Let me share a quote from their website. We guide for good. We believe representation matters. We want the mountain to be inclusive space for women, non-binary, and trans-identifying backcountry athletes, no matter your body type, race, or gender. Moxie strives to break down the social and financial barriers to accessing high-end technical instruction. Kristin and Sheldon are also AMGA Instructor Team members. They teach AMGA Mountain Guide programs, including Women's Rock Guide course. I heard encouraging stories from their students and was curious to learn more about their philosophy and approach. In this episode, we had a deep dive into what affinity space does, why inclusion is a fundamental component of risk management, how we should advocate equity and justice, and what professionalism means to guides. You will recognize their voices very quickly when you start listening, but to give you a head start, the first person talk was Kristin. Without further ado, let's go and enjoy the Moxie ride.
I grew up in Centennial, Colorado, so just south of Denver, and grew up as a family. We went on, we spent quite a bit of time outdoors, whether that was hiking, riding road bikes, riding mountain bikes. When I was a kid, we'd ride road bikes to the Colorado Rockies games downtown Denver, and then we'd get treated to a blizzard from Dairy Queen on the way home. And so I think that's one of the ways that we got introduced, my siblings and I, into being in the outdoors. And when I was 8, I went on my first hut trip, ski hut trip, and we went to the 10th Mountain Division hut, the Skinner hut outside of Leadville, and that was a pretty formative experience for me. Just spending time with a lot of experienced adults in the outdoors, and also just pushing into the mountains. And as I grew older, participated in a lot of sports, ended up choosing soccer as a sport of choice, and went to Texas A&M University in College Station to play. I played goalkeeper, and at Texas A&M, I was privileged to have quite a few opportunities. Ended up playing with the U23 women's national team, the U20s. And then after college, went to New Jersey to go play professional soccer for Sky Blue FC. And when that league folded, it was kind of it folded. And I was like, okay, what do I do? I moved back home to Denver and started taking the prerequisites to go to PA school. And in that process, just recognized that I wanted to be outside. Didn't want to be inside in a building, and moved to Steamboat Springs. And when I was in Steamboat, that was where I was like, I want to spend my time outdoors. I want to find a way to be out here and learn and be with people. And um, that was kind of when I started the guiding track.
Oh, so that's interesting. So you have like good athletic background, like soccer. So
Yep.
you play professionally too at one point.
Yep.
Yeah. Was that so? I assume you definitely okay. You love the out being outside, and then you also probably love sports.
Yeah.
Uh, is
Yeah.
was
I
mm-hmm.
do. We actually of late have gotten into watching women's basketball.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's been a lot of fun watching. We were in Red Rock last fall. Sheldon and I and a couple of friends went to the like WNBA championships game, and it's just been a fun way to support women. And I think women and just like grow the sport. And I think that when I was playing soccer in New Jersey, it was around the time, I don't know how familiar you are um, with the challenges in women's soccer, but it was around the time where coaches were being accused, like in present day, people had been accused of sexual abuse or like our housing conditions weren't great. And it was really the start of like, I mean, not the start, but kind of when the women's soccer movement gained momentum in the like equal pay and equality in women's sports. And I really wasn't, yeah, was there kind of at the beginning of that. But it's been cool to see the women that are playing now progress and fight for the things they fight for. And that's been neat to see.
Okay. So I read this article and then from I think some news outlet based in Denver talking about you studied sports management and
Yep,
international cultural diversity.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So
That's been just equality and diversity has just been something that's been interesting to me since I was a kid. My grandma, she would go to anti-drone rallies in Georgia when she was 86. And I think that was formative for me as a child. And, I did have a lot of privilege growing up in a white middle class family. And yeah, I think using that space to help others has just kind of been a core belief.
I see. Yeah. So how about Sheldon?
Yeah, I
What's
think
you?
that Kristin and I, we really joined forces in our core belief that um, sports and that exploring the outdoors is a fundamentally political act, and that you can't, you, that there's no such thing as trying to pretend that taking up space in the outdoors or having embodied experience or that um, funding or access or being safe in the outdoors, that all of these things are political. And one of the reasons that she and I have been able to come together and build Moxie together is this shared understanding that um, women and other marginalized groups have not traditionally had the same sort of access to the outdoors and to high level technical instruction that other groups have had. And I started out as like a summer camp kid in Vermont. We we hiked quite a bit with our family and went camping. And I chose to go to school in Colorado Springs and move west for a little more adventure. And honestly, I just wanted to live somewhere where it was sunnier. No offense, Vermont. Um, and during college, I started working with the outdoor recreation club, leading trips. At the same time, I was pursuing a degree in feminist and gender studies. And during my junior year, with two of my friends from Colorado College, the three of us climbed Denali. So we were like 20 or something. And the I think that we decided to climb Denali when we didn't yet know how to tie a figure eight. So we put the cart before the horse a bit, but I think that's a fair style to operate in. And after I finished college, I went into guiding full time, guiding mountain climbing as well as ski patrolling, and really enjoyed the guiding. But I think that until the past few years, I really felt a disconnect between my core political beliefs and I would say profound or foundational interests in justice and equity, and informing Moxie, Kristin and I, and finding Kristin, frankly, and forming Moxie, was able to start to meld those two interests, in a way that I think positions us to best use our outdoor skills for good, and also keep us outside and keep us at a living wage, and be able to meet cool and interesting and driven people such as yourself, who are also working to not to better the industry, but I think frankly better the position of women, of non-binary people, of people of color, people who don't speak English as their first language, underserved populations, whether that might be like financially or socially. And it's been in the last couple of years, the amount of growth that I imagine you've seen as well, in starting to the crag looks really different now, and the ski area looks different now, and it's pretty inspiring to see that, it's not just us that are interested in these goals. I think that the culture does seem to be shifting as well.
Nice. And you talk quite a lot about building Moxie Mountain Guides. So maybe we'll just, switch our focus a little bit on here, because there's a lot of interesting things here. I read somewhere that you founded it officially in January 2023.
Yeah.
So it's still kind of pretty young, I would say. And then I totally agree with you. Just like eventually, you just like to fight the equality and say the DEIJ mission is like mostly a political mission rather than like personal. Because coming here to the States, originally I didn't care about politics that much, but eventually I just like, wow, now I'm a citizen, I can vote. All of a sudden, it's just like I really have to care about a lot of things. It's every single bit related to everything I do. Yeah. So, and I was wondering that, is there any like, say, key moments that on your path to Moxie Mountain Guides that kind of make you feel so strongly that this is going to happen?
Yeah, I think one thing I like looking back on going through the IFMGA and the AMGA process is just the limited amount of like women and marginalized community members that I saw in my programs. I think when I graduated back in 2022 from the IFMGA program, like the AMGA IFMGA program, I counted, and there in all of my courses and exams through the AMGA, there were 7 women and people of color total. And I think, yeah, there were not people that looked like us.
How many people would you guess? So it's like 14 programs with 10 participants.
It's 12 programs. I mean, I think it's 120 people, 120 participants, and instructors, like that includes instructors as well. And as Sheldon and I have gone back and just thinking about that, gone back and looked at the numbers within the AMGA. I think right now there's 17 women IFMGA guides.
Oh, it's still under 20, I guess. I
Yeah.
guess it wrong. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's just over 200 fully certified IFMGA guides in the US. There's, I think the amount of data that the AMGA has on the number of like queer or BIPOC participants in the AMGA programs, the numbers I have right now we have zero data. And so, I mean, I think we're building the affinity programs, we're building these spaces for marginalized members of the community to join, and we're still catching up and trying to figure out how to process this information and utilize it to really try and bring equity to the workplace.
And I think that as we finished our IFMGA certifications, I think we look back at that process and say that we don't want anyone else to go through what we went through in order to get where we are.
So what exactly? Can you elaborate on it?
One of the things is like being like being like the only person from a specific group in a learning environment. It just adds this. There's an amount of cognitive bandwidth that's taken up in being the sore thumb, in being the one person who's different. And as we have built Moxie, or one of the reasons we've been inspired to build Moxie, is what can we do to build the guide service that we wish we had had as we were learning skills? What can we do to build a guide service and that helps build skill sets within recreational climbers or within guides or within leaders of affinity spaces? What can we do to build the educational environment that we wish we had had when we were in those positions? So we're not of the opinion that to be a leader in the outdoors, you need to be an IFMGA guide. And we don't think that you have to go through necessarily AMGA Mountain Guide program in order to be someone that leads your group of friends on a cragging day. But what we do think is that having high-level technical instruction is important, and that certification is important, and that what we've done is we partner with affinity groups to capacity build within that affinity group. So for instance, the All In Ice Fest, which is an ice fest that has taken place over the last
3 years. It's been in existence.
3 years, has, in the first couple of years it existed, it was an ice fest that invited people of color, queer people, climbers of size, from all over the country to come and enjoy ice climbing and learn together. In the first couple of years, they had the leaders or the guides at this ice fest were what we would think of as a more typical or mainstream guide background. They were men in their 30s and 40s, a little bit in their 20s, who were white and English speaking, or English as their primary or their first language. And, so there was we were able to partner with the leadership of the All In Ice Fest and say to them, can you identify leaders within these communities who you think would be interested in learning how to guide, or if they already do guide, need some more mentorship? And partnering with the All In Ice Fest and partnering with the Ouray Ice Park, we were able to put together a mentorship program that lasted an entire year. And we were able to do multiple days of instruction and mentorship with these leaders that then, by the time we got to the All In Ice Fest this year, we had something like 25 guides on the roster to work at the Ice Fest, only 2 of whom I think were straight, white, cis dudes. They were lovely. And all of them had achieved their wilderness first responder. They all had done their single pitch instructor
or Alpine Skills course.
And were all certified?
Yeah, certified SPI.
And they had all done their SPI exams. And that's what we mean by capacity building, is not just saying, hey, we have skills, you need us to come in and lead you. It's like, we want to build a guide service that could be an asset to a group like the All In Ice Fest that said that they themselves want to be taking over the reins. They just need some instruction and mentorship in order to bring their leaders where their leaders need to be in order to take over. And we bring this same attitude of wanting to build people's personal abilities to the instructional work we do with the AMGA. We just finished our first year as AMGA Instructor Team members. And we've really been targeting those things that we felt while we were in these programs, that we felt lonely or we felt self-conscious or experienced just literal sexism. Like, some of it just isn't subtle. And rather than, when we finished our program, throwing in the towel and saying, well, that was awful and I'm glad that's over, we're just more interested in turning back to the problem and saying, I think a lot of these challenges are solvable, and that we're well positioned to help bridge the gap between those who are not being included or whose voices aren't heard, or who, frankly, like, their talents aren't being capitalized in a way that they should be, capitalized on in a way that they should be. And we're hoping to be able to help bridge that gap or be interlocutors for some of those conversations.
I mean, definitely it's cool. I love to see like all sorts of affinity programs, but sometimes I also have some questions. I personally run some affinity programs myself, and I love that population. And obviously, I work with, well, in quote, the so-called normal population too, and I can quite decide that what's the best approach, because in the past I worked with this organization working with in-city youth. So they have scholarship for, say, the underrepresented group or marginalized group. But the program director also insists that we need to insert some, say, cis white kid in there. So because they worry that if we create a so-called non-realistic population in their group, then when they interact, then they go back to their real life, the in-city youth, then so they will have a little bit problem to
fit in the original population. But I think this is a very big question that people might have a little bit different thought. But I'm not assuming that you have the answer, but I just been thinking about that. And then you also have taught affinity programs, and then maybe I'm assuming that when you teach the mountain programs for the AMGA, maybe the population is still maybe more white male than any other populations. Did you find like any difference about that, or now you are in the position of instructing rather than receiving instructing?
Yeah, this last year has been an interesting and engaging crash course into like the other side of the instructional process and the other side of capacity building. And, you know, last fall, Sheldon and I had the opportunity to work alongside two other IFMGA guides, Margaret Wheeler and Karen Bockel. And we got to teach a women's rock guide course in Vegas. And when we were there the first day, I remember we were sitting down and we were all introducing ourselves and kind of sharing our background and why this space might be important to us. And we were allowing the students to speak. And I remember one of the students was just like, I haven't felt like I've belonged or been welcomed in a space. And I'm interested to see whether that can happen here. And just because we had that affinity space didn't mean that those students automatically felt like they should be there. Sheldon and I and others have been talking about there's this difference between being welcoming and being welcomed to a space. So when we welcome someone into a space and we actively are seeking to like build a spot where they want to be, we talk about like, come here, we're going to try and create a safe space, but we can't guarantee a safe space. We're going to work to try and build that. These students didn't need to trust us. Like they didn't trust that space was going to be safe immediately. It takes work to build it. And by the end of the program, affinity spaces, they have like this higher level of care, right? The people in there are used to being marginalized, are used to like, we call it, I don't know, one example is kind of like the death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like we're used to being cut down, and so those paper cuts tend to like be more painful the more we have. Whereas people that aren't in an affinity or like that aren't from a marginalized community, if they get a paper cut, it might feel more real. It might feel harder because they're not used to having them. And there's a higher standard of care. Like we had to sit there and recognize that like we aren't perfect. We don't hold all the identities that some of these students hold, and we're going to make mistakes. But when we make those mistakes, just say, thank you, you're right, and move on. And by the end of the program, this same student that wasn't sure that they would be welcome there or feel safe there was like, this is one of the first times I felt like I belonged. And I think that was, we need to create this sense of belonging and welcome people in prior to them gaining the trust in the system to then participate in a space that is more traditional in the guiding industry, say white and straight cis male. And so it's just a matter of, we're really trying to think about this concept of really welcoming people in and building a space where they want to be and feel safe, and then hopefully expanding that to the bigger world.
I think one of the critiques of affinity spaces, which I'll just go ahead and define how I think of it. An affinity space is a space where people people with shared identities or backgrounds come together, choose to come together to spend time with one another. So, an example of an affinity space might be a Black student union at a campus, or at my high school, there was a queer straight alliance. Those were some affinity spaces. And I think one of the challenges within affinity space is trying to think through what is an affinity space and what is segregation. And what do we lose by having an affinity space that's similar in some ways to what we lose by having segregation? And we've had a number of justice-oriented, cis white straight guys say to us, well, one of the bummers about these affinity spaces is that, is it possible that then I don't have people of color in the courses that I take within the guide industry because they're taking courses with one another? Or am I going to have less women in my courses now because the women are taking courses together? And I do think that argument or that perspective, I think it's fair. And I do see, I think that feeling of like, well, I'm missing out on their presence and what I can learn from them. I do think that comes from a good place. And I also think that one of the things that we've found over and over as we build or strive to build safe spaces for people who haven't otherwise felt safe outdoors or safe in these intense instructional environments, one of the things we're finding is that the participants in these courses weren't necessarily going to take the course at all. Meaning that some of the women in our women's rock guide course, it isn't as if they opted out of a co-ed rock guide course in order to take the women's rock guide course. They just weren't going to take a rock guide course. And so to have affinity group spaces at the introductory level of the American Mountain Guides Association's mountain guide program, what it does is allows people to come in, learn the foundational skills without having to exist with the distraction of being the only Black person, being the only woman, without having to bear the cognitive load of having to represent something bigger than who they are as a singular person, and not have to field the consistent microaggressions or guffaws or whether it's overt or subtle or meant to or not, the like racist or sexist language that is really built into a lot of climbing and ski spaces. If we can get folks in an affinity space and they can start to learn the craft, get the joy of the sport, get the leadership opportunities at that base level, what we found is that when they then go to progress into a space that has a greater diversity of people or better represents what the outside world is actually like, that they're better equipped to stand in that space and feel that they belong because they started off in a place where they were welcomed and belonged.
Yeah, I love it. I think you use cognitive load, which I felt that before. Just like, well, I came to this course to learn, but why do I have to use so much energy to think about other things, right? So even though I want so much to focus on learning and get better, but it's very hard to, and then I feel like, oh, I need to perform at least above average or even strive for the excellence.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing. Like, I think that's what we felt. And maybe you felt this too as you were preparing, was like, I need to be better. Like, I need to exceed the prerequisites, which sure, you should. But I need to like be better than all the people there so that I don't have to deal with the cognitive load of being there. And so women or marginalized communities, oftentimes are like, well, I don't want to apply yet. I don't want to apply yet. I don't want to apply yet. And it's like, get the prerequisites, apply, and yeah, it's hard to make that shift because people haven't been welcomed.
Definitely. And sometimes the cognitive load is just like, in that environment that, you got some feedback. You can't help to think, is that because I didn't do it well, or is it because my identity? Even though I try so hard to say it's not because my identity, but it's just that can't escape
help
that thought.
If like, I heard someone say that it's not the fault of the mouse that it's afraid of the cat. and that in so many of these environments, we have experienced profound injustices. We have experienced harassment. We have experienced sexism. We have experienced people making our lives harder on purpose. We also have experienced just these subtle things that, we did an expedition recently where we asked someone. Kristin and I were digging out, building the kitchen. We had like gone in on a ski plane and we said, okay, we set up the tents. We're going to build the kitchen. Can you all build the bathroom? And they built a bathroom, and the expedition's the two of us and two clients. The clients are guys, great guys. Like, one of the like great things about Moxie is that we've not only been able to attract like a clientele that is from what we would think of as not mainstream backgrounds as far as what you see represented in climbing, but we've also been able to attract this awesome clientele of people we think of as like mainstream climbers, like the guys in their 40s who live in big cities and work for banks or work in construction or do development, but they're people that are like aligned with our values. And so they're psyched to get out with us, knowing that their participation in our courses, not only is it a great time for them and they learn a lot and they're guided with the utmost professionalism and care, and I'd like to think sense of humor as we try to bring, but they also know that they're like contributing to the bigger picture of Moxie, and that their program costs help subsidize some of the program costs we do for lower income folks. Anyhow, we're out there with these great guys and they go to build the bathroom, and they built a bathroom where you have to stand up to pee. And it was just this like great example of like, even like the people that are just so fantastic, they just have blind spots, they don't have that, they haven't had that experience of like needing to build a bathroom where someone might need to squat, because Kristin,
okay, yes,
yeah, and Kristin and I, we're both women and we're both female, and these, I think if that were my very first introduction to these guys, it wouldn't have been hard for me to take all of the other burden or take all the other past experiences that I've had with men and see these guys that didn't even build me a bathroom that I could use and be like, oh God, like this is going to be a really bad week of skiing. But you're right in that if it is a space of all women or non-binary people, if it is a space of all people of color, you're exactly right, Ting Ting, when you it really struck home for me when you said like that receiving a piece of feedback, that if I'm in an affinity space, I don't have to spend that extra little bit of mental energy thinking, are they saying this to me because I'm a girl? Are they saying this to me because I'm the oldest one here? Are they saying this to me because I'm the youngest one here? Are they saying this to me because I'm the least experienced here? Are they saying this to me because I didn't learn English as my first language? Are they saying this to me because I come from a different culture from them? No, they just want me to tie the knot differently.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the real strengths of an affinity space, is getting to take out some of that sort of static in my ears.
Yeah. And then when we like go and work in this environment and work alongside these guides that we had for All in Ice Fest, and there's two white straight cis dudes that are there, and they get to be in this space after these people already feel like they belong and are welcomed there. And these two dudes are people that like listen and have the ability to step back. The power that they get from then being able to interact and see the way this space interacts with each other is quite powerful. They both shared like, wow, that was powerful for us, and there's so much here and so much I have to learn, and it stretches them, and hopefully they bring that forward. And so yes, like these affinity spaces are super important, and I also think you're right that once people are welcomed in and feel like they belong, and that's not just one affinity space worth of work, but there's also this ability for it to trickle down, kind of like trickle down economics through the greater good, and work towards the greater good.
From the conversation we just had, I have two questions. So one question is, you were talking about these two clients, these male clients, knows that their tuition or their program fee will also go toward helping like other groups. So I saw that you have the model of pay as you should. So you basically have a listed price, but then people can decide how much they're gonna pay. They can pay more, they can pay less. So is that for every single program Moxie runs?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a mission-driven guide service, which means we are a for-profit business, but we're closing the gap between folks that need high-end technical instruction. We're doing what we can to close the financial and social gap for those folks to be able to attain it. And we decided to try out this pay what you should model, which you also hear called equity pricing, is another way to frame it, is that if a person makes $100,000 a year and a different person makes $40,000 a year, that their payment for this service should be different. And that those participating in our programs are asked to take a look at their personal capacities to pay and to take the base price and either add to it or subtract from it in order to find a price that makes the program accessible to them. So we just did our first year of taxes, or I should say Kristin did.
That was a journey.
Kristin's been injured all winter,
Ooh.
which has been, bummer for her. I've been living my best life because she has to sit at the computer. But having just finished our taxes, our pricing model, our experiment, it worked out like literally exactly perfectly, that we had just as many people fund their programs over, as we had folks that couldn't reach the baseline price. And so our like vision of world peace actually came to fruition.
Yeah.
Which, it was a bit of a gamble, but we were like, let's just try it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been, I think one of the things we hear in guiding is if we charge more, people won't come. And we just have seen that that's like
true.
Categorically untrue.
Yeah.
And I do think, sure, we are, we're both women, we're both white, we're both AMGA guides, and we live in Ridgway, Colorado. And, we do have the privilege of being there. And like, we charge more than any other guide service in the area. Yeah. And people pay it. And also people pay $25 to do a program.
Yeah. Our set rates are the highest day rate in the San Juan. We're just really expensive to go out with. But we also, it's important to us that we each make $60,000 a year. And one of our, we have so many different tendrils of advocacy out there, but one of them is really about like labor in guiding and people being able to make a living wage and being able to make enough money that they can take a day off when they're injured, or they can take a week off if they've just experienced a loss, or they can pay for therapy, or they can pay to go to the doctor, and they can own a house. Which hasn't really been what it's been like in guiding. And I think that there's a number of the things that we really try to embody is just one of them is like livable wage and fair labor practices when we hire folks. And we have just found that in charging more charging more to the clients that can afford to pay more has been a fantastic solution to be able to reach a lot of those goals, both for our personal sustainability within the industry and our bigger picture goals of being able to bring along more people.
Gee, it's so nice to talk with you two smart women because in guiding industry that I have interviewed some guys, talked to some guy friends, definitely sustainability and just basically just like people just like, can I save money? And then what if I get hurt? The longevity of guiding. And then everybody knows that when you're starting out, there's no benefits and all sorts of random stuff. And so basically a lot of guys worry about that. And then I think to really tackle it as like in a big picture framework is like really cool. And I'm so glad that you do this experiment. I know maybe as a mountain guys, you do a boat to start with. So you just like, okay, we're going to try this payment program.
Yeah. And it's been really interesting. We also work for ARI as instructor trainers, and ARI, the American Institute of Avalanche Research and Education. Did I get that right? I think so. As instructor trainers, so we train professional avalanche workers to teach level 1 avalanche courses, level 2 avalanche courses. And it's been really great to just sit alongside these students and talk to them about the challenges they're facing in the workplace as they're earlier in their careers, and help work with them to like share our experiences and take their experiences and really build the ability to like provide them resources to advocate for themselves and for each other and to push people forward. And I think one of the things that we've started thinking about is like, I guess the idea of mentorship, like Sheldon and I talk about this a lot, is that, I didn't really have a mentor that looked like me when I was going through the program. And so Sheldon likes to say there's this idea, like everybody has this idea that there's a mentorship fairy and they're just going to drop a mentor in your lap and then you're going to have this person that's going to show you the world and you're going to like learn all the things and be really great. And it's just not true. In particular for like people like women or Black people or queer people or, you know, like it just doesn't exist. There's not people that look like us and therefore people don't select you. It's not malicious. It's just that science shows we don't select people that don't look like us. And this idea that like we need friendtors and people that want to like that might have a similar skill set, but that we can go out in the mountains and like be in a place where we can like bounce ideas off of each other and learn from each other and push each other in the mountains. And then also this idea of having like sponsors in the workplace, like people that want to like advocate for you in the workplace, because oftentimes people will advocate for people that look like themselves. And so finding people like, you know, advocating for like, for example, for Sheldon in the workplace and saying, hey, here are things that like she's really good at this and that and this and that. And like sharing those qualities so that the employer like provides them with opportunities. And that's just something that like we need to continue to build and continue to grow in the industry.
When I think about people out there that are doing the sort of melding of our outdoor passions and guiding passions with political work, I just can't help but mention this week's loss that the climbing community suffered with the loss of Robbie Mekas, who they're she'll have to forgive me that I've only ever read her name and I didn't get a chance to meet her, but so I may be mispronouncing the last name, but Robbie lost her life in this past week on a climbing expedition in Alaska. And I think about this woman who is a really tremendous ranger in New York, which has some of the most brutal weather in the US, and she worked in rescue and is one of the reasons that there's a number of ice climbing and winter mountaineering enthusiasts in New York that are still alive, because she not only was a leader in within search and rescue, but also a big leader in education about keeping people safe as they go out and recreate. And she and her climbing partner, Melissa Orzechowski, Melissa is now currently, as we understand, still in the ICU in Anchorage. And these two people they started the Queer Ice Climbing Fest in New York, and really both of them, and we hope that Melissa will be able to recover and go back to climbing, but both of them really strove. They made their climbing lives about more than climbing. And when I think about what it means to mentor, that Robbie was a transgender woman, and she lived her life out and advocating for queer climbers and advocating for transgender people in the workplace, and was is a mentor that I think we feel that we've lost as an inspiration, but we also know that there's people we're close with who they saw someone like Robbie out there and were able to say, okay, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And I think that's also part of why it's important to us to not just climb for ourselves, but be public facing in our climbing so that other folks can see us and perhaps see some of themselves in us and say, hey, if they're out there doing that, there's not a reason that I can't be out there doing that.
Yeah, and I think like really it's like hopefully we can capacity build and allow more thought. Hopefully we can be a part of the wide range of people that are doing amazing things. Like I think you interviewed Mary recently from AAI and the work she's doing
Yes.
To like help build and create a more diverse guiding population. Like hopefully we can work alongside these people to continue doing that and work ourselves out of a job, like get ourselves out of being in the position of power and let other people that don't look like us or haven't traditionally like been represented in the guiding community have a place to be and be representatives and be the people in charge.
I read this quote from 5280.com, so this article. So I think this quote maybe is from you, Kristin, saying that there's this culture where being a guide has traditionally meant that you can climb hard, you can ski the thickest line. There hasn't necessarily been this focus on what actually is a good guide. And so, I mean, I agree with you, but I kind of love to hear your words to define that. What exactly do you mean by a good guide?
Yeah, I think go ahead.
We've been really thinking through like what professionalism means, and that traditionally in guiding we've thought of professionalism as like, well, your certifications are up to date and you wear a clean shirt. And like that for us, professionalism is like, what are you doing to make the industry better for the workers within it? What are you doing to make the land that you work on healthier? How are you being a steward of how are you being a steward? How are you being a steward for the people who belong to that land? And how are you treating them or incorporating those people into the work that you do? So we, for instance, do a $10 per participant per day donation to a Native organization on whatever land we're using. So rather than simple land acknowledgements, we, for instance, for every day we're in the ice park with a client, we donate $10 to the Boys and Girls Club of the Southern Ute tribe. And when we travel, we find like different organizations wherever we're traveling to donate to. And you're a good guide. Are you like leaving people with experiences that help empower them to be better community members, to have a confidence level that lets them like stand up for not just like unsafe practices in climbing, but perhaps be able to stand up to land managers or to private landowners that aren't allowing access, or to have to value themselves and the land that they're in a way that helps them be better stewards of that resource. What else do you think of as a good guide?
Yeah, it's not just about being able to climb hard or ski hard, as we mentioned. It's about incorporating all these other components and providing your clients and your guests what they need and meeting them where they are to find a success for them.
We do programming, partnering with affinity groups. We do our programming like a queer climbing weekend or a weekend for climbers of size. We also will we do private guiding for any sport, whether it's ice climbing or rock climbing or alpine climbing, expeditions or day trips. We do private guiding, just with anybody and everybody, basically provided they're like pleasant. That's all we need. And we also started doing consulting for guide services and educational groups that are interested in better aligning their values with diversity, equity, and inclusion, better aligning those values that they personally hold with their policies and procedures, both internally and with their clients, in order to help leverage those values and better execute programming that aligns with those things.
I'm curious, so you both teach the all women rock guide course. So traditionally, like my experience taking AMGA courses is like it's very technical, right? So we focus on the so-called hard skills, but we certainly talk about client care. But I really think it's really not almost non-existent when we talk about that. So I was wondering when you do so as an IT member that when you teach the courses, did you spend a little bit more on that part of curriculum?
Yeah, I think the like we can't guide if we can't manage risk. Like our job is to manage risk. And part of managing risk is managing the emotional components, the social components, the physical components, the financial components. And so those are things that we're really trying to bring in to our work, like prior to even meeting the students.
Yeah, and this isn't just in like an affinity, like a women's rock guide course. This is in any program we do. We're trying to work with students to understand that inclusion is foundational to risk management.
Yeah. And so really like taking part in that before the course, during the course, and then sitting alongside the students at the end to be like, what do you need in your progression? Or here are things that we think might help you, or using them to brainstorm. Like we all have experiences, right, in life. And if we can utilize, like if I can learn from you, Ting Ting, and from Sheldon, and from, the students that we work alongside, we can really utilize their learnings and like learn quicker and progress quicker. And those components are like, I can't be a good guide. I can't be a good guide if I can't tune in to the emotional risks, the social risks, the financial risks, and the like getting to know the people, getting to know the land. Yeah, I would say that's foundational to like our beliefs, and hopefully, there's a lot of people in the industry like yourself that are working to build a better guiding landscape. And it starts in those formative years, right? When we're taking our first rock guide course, or first, like when you teach SPI programs, teaching those.
Yeah.
True.
I think that it's interesting. We've had this like bifurcation of like hard skills and soft skills. And it's so true, right? That like we say soft skills, and I think that we have under-resourced, under-taught. We haven't given those like the attention that they deserve. And I think some of that is because the word soft skills, like maybe we need to replace it with like risk management skills, or with like emotional intelligence, or with communication skills. Because it is true, I just taught a ski guide course, and one of the things I said to one of the participants, who he was setting a pace that was just like, it was just a little bit too fast, and he would turn around and he would say, how's the pace? And he wouldn't hear anything from anyone, and he would just turn around and keep going. And to his mind, well, he asked, and I was like, well, true, that's true, you did ask, good job asking. But like what we need to know is take a second, and I want you, Brandon, to stop and think, like, how can you get better information from them? What could you ask to solicit better information? And why are you asking them? Because the reason he's asking them how the pace is he needs to know, because he needs to know, is this supposed to be a 6-hour day or do we have 2 more hours? Are these people even going to like me at the end of the day? Am I blowing my trust with them because they can't breathe? And so when we get to the top of the mountain, they're not going to trust me anymore because they've just spent 2 hours redlining and feeling bad about themselves. So realizing that the stakes of what those soft skills give us actually are pretty high, and working with people to train them, because some people don't have that sort of same amount of social or emotional skill set or intelligence. Training them to think about not just what it is to, like, quote unquote, be nice to clients, but also what questions do I need to ask them and how do I need to treat them to get the information that I need from them in order to execute a safe and fun day. So what he ended up doing was taking a break for a second and saying to them, hey, were we skinning at a pace where you all could have a conversation with each other? And they said, no, we couldn't have done that. And, that way he could calibrate a little bit better than just saying, am I going too fast?
Right.
Yeah. And I like that you phrased that just like, okay, why did he ask these questions, right? What did he trying to accomplish? Because just like you said, that a lot of things we observe the clients, as for me as a rock guide, that observe their movement on hike, on third, fourth class terrain, or on the climb, that obviously I don't just ask the questions, and I have to observe, collect information, and then do my little calculation. But definitely, like you said, it's not just like I'm trying to be nice. There's a lot of things involved. Just like, am I going to be benighted? Should I just bail right now? And
Right. Yep.
yeah. So definitely, it's also part of the risk management, which is a very important job for us as a guide. So I like that framing, right? Because it's not just the so-called client care seem kind of very abstract.
Yeah.
Then so like that, you dig it deeper to make a connection from just the care, whatever people define care. Definitely, that's like really cool, which I think is a very important thing, more important than people think.
Yeah, and it's like culturally, the client care aspect of guiding in the US is not something that exists, right? Like in France or in Switzerland. Those guides, like the history there is like, we're here to take you up a mountain, we're here to go ski this thing. And it is like what an opportunity we have to like build this skill set here in the US and bring it to other places and be like, hey, look, like it's admirable. I'm not saying it's wrong that guides, want to take people and take them to go do some things, but how can we again grow guiding for good, and like teach these guides to be better guides and in turn teach their colleagues in other places.
And I have some question about like the mentorship. And I think in the Powder magazine, so there's an article about you, Sheldon. And then over there you were talking about like mentorship, just like traditionally, say women or underrepresented group, they don't see a person that's in that position, right? So if you wish that if they at least the existence, so they can see that, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. I guess human beings are very visual people, so we always see from the appearance, you say they look like me and I can be like that. And I think that's important too. But also wondering, can we break the barrier of just not really thinking about the appearance? And then what kind of challenging during you are seeking mentors and then now give mentorship to other people? I think maybe both directions still going on. Like what kind of advice or challenges that you get in that process?
I was just watching a compilation of little boys having their basketballs signed by um the like current leaders in like the NCAA women's basketball, and like what it means to have cross-gender fandom or cross-gender mentorship, that like to have what a thing to have achieved in women's sports, to have young people looking up to an athlete and not and saying, I'm looking up to Caitlin Clark because she's a tremendous basketball player. I'm not necessarily looking up to Caitlin Clark because she's a tremendous woman basketball player. And I, you know, the girls might also be saying, and I could be that someday, but to have the boys also be looking at her and saying, I could be that someday. And I have had now quite a few male students or colleagues say what a tremendous impact it's had on them to have me as their mentor. And they say, like, because you're good at guiding, not just because you're a woman, but also because your experiences of being a woman have in some way given you some skills that I, as a guy, haven't had the opportunity to have. Um, so I do, and I do think about with younger women needing mentors, and there, frankly, there just aren't that many women out there to mentor them. It's like I think of Ting Ting and Kristin and I, it's like we each we each could have 20 women we're mentoring, but like I just can't. So it is true that we have to seek mentorship from people that aren't like us, and we need to mentor people who aren't like us. And so it's not just about, hey, little girls, find men that will mentor you, find other women that will mentor you, hey, colleagues. It's also about training, making the implicit explicit, in that saying to our male colleagues, hey, would you consider taking under your wing this young woman guide? Because again, it's not like they wouldn't, it just hadn't occurred to them. Or saying to these groups of young guides of color, hey, you all don't necessarily have a mentor, but what can you do to network with each other and be friend tours to each other so that you can make up for that missing piece of training that you are not getting because you don't have a quote unquote mentor in your life.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think the explicit parts, because in the article you mentioned that, so it ends up like a lot of, not a lot, so like some women then turns out to have mentor and become a romantic partner, and then maybe like marry like a fellow guys, because somehow this male and women uh relationships a little bit like complex and tricky in that way. And I do have some women students, they talk about that a little bit, just like, oh, I just wanted to go climbing, and then but things start to get a little bit like awkward and weird. So that kind of remind me of this challenge of like seeking a mentor of the opposite sex.
Yeah, and I think the better we can all be at expressing our boundaries, the better we can all be at knowing what we want from relationships and expressing that to the people we are in friendships with. And also, I think that everyone just needs to continue to be willing to prioritize their own social and emotional safety with colleagues, with clients, with mentors, with climbing partners, and be willing to step out of situations where they're feeling creeped out or feeling that they're not being respected or feeling even just a little bit of, ooh, I don't know if I want to spend the night in the tent with this guy. And I think men stepping up to the plate and being more explicit with, how can I make you feel more comfortable in this space? What can I do to make our relationship stronger and to make our relationship about climbing? What can I do to build a friend group or build a workplace where you feel more welcome, rather than all that work always having to be on the part of the women.
Yeah. And I think one thing Sheldon said is, if you have a microphone, you got to use it. And so these people are in positions of power, whether that's us now on the AMGA instructor team, or whether that's your male colleague in the workplace. Them, like Sheldon mentioned earlier, some of the work we've been doing with Moxie is working with like guide services to help develop inclusive practices and really building that into the infrastructure of the guiding the guiding services and the guiding culture, and making it institutionalized will help with that process. And so, yeah, getting the male colleagues, getting the people in positions of power to really like advocate in the workplace, have policies and procedures in place that like you will get paid. Like if you're going to step away from this trip because you feel uncomfortable or someone made a comment that was inappropriate, you're going to get paid. And that will help incentivize the right thing happening, as opposed to being pushed into a situation because you feel like you need to work it in order to pay for your groceries or your rent or your training.
Yeah, so here I have a little bit personal advice seeking right here.
Yeah.
So I assuming that, so you mentioned a couple times that right now that you have the past experience, right now you're at the position of like potential position of power. And so in order to like, for me, sometimes I give feedback. In the past, I have all this cognitive load, right? But right now, I can feel like, oh, I can take the feedback as is, because maybe hopefully, sometimes I still could potentially take it personal, but then, and then in the same time, I wish that when I give feedback, people don't just take feedback as it's not taken personal. But I understand that some people have all this baggage they're coming from, so it's potentially it's easier for them to get quite defensive or taken personal. So I experienced some difficulty on my part to give people feedback, even though I never think that I'm at the position of power. But still, sometimes people treat me in that position. So I'm just kind of curious, do you have like any advice of giving feedback so people can actually take the feedback?
Well, I'm smiling because it's hard and we're experiencing the same things you are. And I think part of the reason why feedback is hard to receive or hard to give is because it is complex. And like we've been cultured, or we've had this like death by 1,000 paper cuts of people telling us like, Kristin, just go out there and be more confident. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, how do I just be more confident? I'm just trying to I'm quiet because I'm listening. I'm quiet because I'm like trying to learn. It's not that I lack confidence. Or then you go out there and you like exert yourself, right? And someone's like, you're being overconfident, like, take a
Or bossy.
yeah, or bossy. So it's like this, like, there's a lot of trauma involved in feedback because we haven't been, we've been given feedback that has been harmful, and therefore we're like, I don't want any feedback because I'm not sure this is going to help me. But I think one of the things we talk about and practice a lot in the area courses we teach, particularly on like the upper level programs, is like, what is like, how do we provide good feedback? First, it starts off with like one thing we try to think about is like, do you want feedback? Are you willing to accept feedback right now? And then providing feedback that is actionable, timely, tangible, and like stuff that is digestible. Like, is this something that I really need to provide feedback on, or is this something that is just like something that can wait?
Taking the first step of getting on the same page about the students' goals for themselves has been pretty helpful for me in providing feedback. Meaning, sometimes it's as simple as, well, my goal is to be able to execute this rock rescue drill in less than 45 minutes. But it can be something like, well, my goal on this climb was I was focusing on setting good gear and bringing the clients into and out of stances without getting the ropes twisted. If they identify the goal, that makes me giving the feedback a lot easier because I can reference their goal in giving the feedback. So I have found that my best feedback is student-centered, meaning it's about what they're trying to get out of the day, is goal referenced, meaning that I can start with, you said that you wanted to work on this particular thing. Here's some ways to work on that thing. It's actionable, meaning instead of saying, you climbed that pitch too slowly, I say, one of the things that you've referenced is that you'd like to be more efficient in your climbing. That pitch took you about 45 minutes. A way that you could look into saving 5 minutes or so is I found if I was a little more critical about which pieces of protection I extended versus didn't extend was a way that I have saved time. I think the other which when do you find or what sort of feedback do you feel like you have students or clients be like most resistant to, or like which sort of environment are you in where you're giving feedback and you're like, oh, they take it so personally?
It's mostly in SPI exam.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can pass them, I can fail them,
Right.
and I definitely have my own reason. There are guidelines, but I can understand people don't want to hear that. Sorry, you probably have to do this again. So, uh, so I think that's the most difficult situation for me. Usually, people taking a lesson or course from me, they already most of them just like, oh, I'm here for Ting Ting to share experience with me. So they are more receptive. It's mostly doing this type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. And something we've been talking about is like the culture of exams and trying to thinking of trying to with the students we work with, we can't undo all the damage that the idea of failure has done in like one exam, but trying to rebuild this idea of like failure being like a step in the process and trying to be really upfront with the two of us with our students about times that we haven't passed courses and have needed to retake things. and also trying to be really explicit about what happens if you fail in order to help lower the stakes a little bit. Meaning, like, if you here's how you could fail this examination, here's what that would look like, but here's what we would do. We would set you up to work on this skill, and this skill, and then in 2 weeks' time, there's another exam over at so and so, and I know they have space, and you'd be able to redo it then.
Yeah. It's like we talk about like part of this is normalizing failure. Like we've made failure this like big scary thing and trying to bring it down to just like, here's what happens. It's happened to us. And acknowledging, it might cost more money, it might cost more time. And it will be better for you, it will be better for your guests, it will be better for the industry. To like have you in a place where you can adequately manage risk for yourself and for others.
Yeah, I'm still working on this, obviously. But thank you for all these ideas, for sure.
Yeah, we don't have it nailed. It's like, we're trying to learn and trying to see what works. And
I also find it's interesting hearing this from you, Ting Ting, because we have like a number of students we've worked with who say that you are the strongest instructor they've had.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And that you provide a really positive exam environment.
Yeah.
And it makes, the fact that you're asking this question, it just makes me think that you're doing it right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Because it's like if you're doing it right, you're like always trying to get better as an instructor. You're like always trying to create a better environment for the student. You're noticing their stress levels. And I think that us, like the three of us, you and me and Kristin, being in like the positions of leadership and of examination power that we are in within the guiding industry, being able to bring the sort of humility of trying to use even the exam as an opportunity to make better guides. I just think it's cool to hear you ask that, knowing what students say about you.
Yeah. And that we're like, Ting Ting is a human we want to send people to. Like when they ask, who should we take our school with? We're like, Ting Ting.
Yeah.
I
Thanks.
think the other component of this is like going back to something we said earlier, like when we're in a course and trying to say, hey, like we're going to try our hardest to create a safe space, but we can't promise a safe space. Also, in a learning environment, you are going to experience discomfort, and discomfort is a part of learning. Like we're not like, you are going to be trying new things, and that is going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to have your peers here, and we're going to try our hardest to make it safe. We can't guarantee that. And there is discomfort in learning. There will be discomfort in this exam, and acknowledging that and saying, we're here. Let's normalize this. Let's work together to help set you up for success.
I think that trying to split up like what is unsafe and what is uncomfortable is that has also like been useful. And I think it's another one of these places where like, we say to the technical director at the AMGA will say to us, well, maybe I say to him, I was the only woman in my ski guide course, and I felt uncomfortable, but I think I also felt unsafe, meaning that I could lose like social standing, or I could incur physical harm over the course based on my not having like the same amount of respect or rapport with the other people, the other participants. And what he said back to me was something to the effect of, well, I know what you feel like because I'm often the only male in a yoga class.
Okay.
I appreciated him like trying to think through, what it feels like to be the only person. I really think that that sort of demonstrates the idea of like you were uncomfortable, you were not unsafe when you were the only guy in the
In the
women's,
yoga.
whereas being like the only woman in a male environment that has traditionally been like hyper masculine, that's a different feeling. That discomfort's also unsafe. And it is a challenge as an educator in these high stakes environments that I think you'll agree with is like wanting to build in the students the resilience to be able to feel uncomfortable and to fail and to know what they need to do and to retain through that discomfort and that failure um, the self-respect or the self-confidence or the belief in oneself to be able to pick up, learn, and move on. And recognizing when a circumstance has become unsafe, meaning that at the end of that experience, that person doesn't feel supported, doesn't know what to do to get better, and isn't going to come back. And that feels like that's where the unsafe is. I want them to be, they have to be uncomfortable. That's what learning is. You're showing up and you're bad at something and you have to demonstrate that you're crappy at it in order to learn how to be better at it.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard.
Yeah.
Trying to distinguish that for myself, what's safety and what's comfort, and then trying to help the students sort that through as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, certainly in the mountain guiding history or in our personal climbing or skiing pursuit, there's definitely moments of those, right? So I know that as a climber or just like in the past, I do more alpine stuff. Now I don't do it because I think it's a little bit risky, but just trying to see where's the line that you're like, okay, I can be still resilient to push on, and then what's the line that you just say, all right, I don't want to cross this thing. It's pretty hard. Yeah. So now we have to help students to also not figure that out, but help them to find a way that they can figure out on their own. Definitely challenging.
We have so few days where we're like with them, right? A lot of the learning is we can provide them tangible tools and then they have to go off into this big bad world and like negotiate it and then come back and refine their skills in an exam setting or in another course. And it's hard and it's not without risk.
Yeah. One little question is just out of my curiosity. So, for Sheldon, that you at one point that you have a chance to pursue to become a pro skier, and then in the article you didn't like elaborate why you just like, okay, this is not for me, and then you kind of turn 180 and then start to pursue the guiding industry. I'm just kind of curious because I just interview Margaret Wheeler. So I haven't released the episode, soon gonna be released. And she also have a chance of to be a pro skier and then turn away. So I'm just kind of curious about your own reason.
Well, I do want to start by saying that I was never like God's gift to free skiing. Having said that, I think that after like seeing the amount of risk involved and in the particular type of skiing I was involved in, I came to realize that there were other ways to be a professional skier and getting paid to ski tour, and getting paid to go on ski expeditions or getting paid to work on my skis alongside like a scientific research group who's studying glaciology or something, that those started to feel like more sustainable ways to be a professional skier than like hucking my meat off of cliffs and like praying I didn't break both my femurs. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, and I want to respect your time. So can you repeat what you two do, and then how people can find you?
Um, so Moxie Mountain Guides is a um, mountain guide service that guides rock climbing, alpine climbing, ice climbing, expedition climbing, as well as backcountry skiing and destination skiing and expedition skiing. And we do both programs. We would call them like a dated program. Like on June 16th, we're doing a 2-day climbing program for climbers of size. So we do organized group climbing and skiing, um, instruction and guiding, as well as private guiding for people who have specific objectives that they want to climb and ski. And our website actually, I think, is about finished. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think they'll press the publish button on it any
Awesome.
now. Yes, that is we didn't I often say we didn't get into guiding because we're good at email. So to get in touch with us, pretty soon our website should be up, but we're info@moxiemountainguides.com. And our phone number is 970-239-1869.
Nailed it.
And we've got a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and our website will be up soon. But we love having people get in touch that have ideas for a program. For instance, recently we had someone get in touch that said, hey, me and two of my girlfriends want to do 3 days in Las Vegas with you all, but we'd also like to meet some more climbers. Do you think that you all could put together a program of 6 people, starting with the 3 of us, and maybe invite some other clients that you think would match well with our skill set? So we do things like that. And we should have our fall and winter of 24-25 dates published sometime within the next month, so people can start getting organized and get those on their calendar.
Awesome. I think then by the time that I publish this episode, I think your website will be all like online.
Just in case.
Yes, but definitely that would be good for people to have a gateway to like route through you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So anything you want to plug in there before I let you go?
I like what you are doing is really special and cool, and I'm taking voices throughout the industry, and kind of highlighting them and bringing them to the forefront. And thank you for doing the work that you do, both
I
with
just selfish that I want to get some advice from fellow guys.
well, yeah, but thank you for the work you do in
Thank
putting
you.
together this podcast and highlighting important people in the field, and for the work you do in like educating guides and creating a compassionate space.
I also think you're doing a really strong job of like letting there be like lots of definitions of what it is to be a woman guide. That I see, trans women guides, or there's women who are guides who weren't born with a female body, who I also see you being really inclusive of, and recognizing that there's like a spectrum of women guides who just want to be seen as guides versus women guides who want to be seen as female guides or women guides, and have a different set of politics or priorities. Or I see you talking to people who have kids or don't have kids, or I just think it's I really, like Kristin said, appreciate the work that you're doing, highlighting who's out there and just the like diversity of interests and experiences of all of us.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the last thing I would add is just that our emotional health is so tied to our ability as humans to like manage life and manage risk. And I think encouraging people to use resources like the American Alpine Club's Grief Grant or SOAR or the AMGA's RISE page on their website to find resources to help build resilience and mental health and set themselves up for success and to make this a sustainable career or a sustainable recreational pursuit for them.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Hopefully I'll have a chance to meet you in person and maybe climb together. I can't ski, so it's gotta be climbing.
Like, you can come bring us up a route in
Yeah.
Red Rock sometime or something.
Sure, yeah, I'll definitely hope that we can connect in the future.